Welcome to the Collecting the Past podcast. Funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities and in partnership with the Flannery O'Connor Institute for the Humanities, this project paired students from Georgia College with community members to collect oral histories from individuals who either lived in Milledgeville during the heart of O'Connor's writing career or whose lives were shaped by events that took place during this period. Our goals with the project are to expand the existing historical narrative of our town by documenting unwritten life stories and creating a public digital archive. As you'll hear, the students had fun creating their own podcasts in the style of their choice. Like our narrators, each episode has its own personality.
So this is Courtney Brandon's interview for the local history class. Could you tell me your name, please?
Sure. My name is Kim Griffin.
Okay, so is your family from Milledgeville?
My parents are actually not from Milledgeville.
Okay.
My dad was originally from Dublin, Georgia, Lawrence County, and my mom was born in Oklahoma.
Okay.
So they settled here back probably in the early 1950s. They originally moved to the Coopers community, which is South Baldwin County, and then they moved to Milledgeville like in 1960, I guess.
Okay.
Been here ever since. So
did you grow up here?
I did.
Okay.
Yes. I grew up in on a little road called Fox Hill Road off of Highway 49, and pretty much lived there most of my childhood. So, yeah.
And then have you pretty much stayed around Milledgeville?
I have. Pretty much the farthest I've wandered is working in Macon, Georgia. Mm-hmm. When I was accepted into nursing school in 1988, I got a job as a nurse extern at Medical Center of Central Georgia, which is now Atrium, in the ER. Mm-hmm. And I worked at that hospital after I graduated in 1990 up until almost 1991. And then I came to work here at the local hospital here. As a nurse, yes.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And did you go to school at Georgia College? Or?
I did. I went to, I got my undergrad at Georgia College, mm-hmm. And then I got my doctorate here in Georgia College in 2021.
All right, awesome. Mm-hmm. So since you were a college student here, was there a talk about the cemetery, among the students? Was there anything, that people talked about, any stories?
Well, I think the big thing was around Halloween time, people would talk about the Dixie Haygood story. I don't know if you've heard of her.
No, I haven't.
She was thought of as a witch, mm-hmm. and she could actually do these supposedly superhuman things. You know, she would do these little sideshows or whatever. And supposedly she had this superhuman strength, and so it was thought that Dixie Haygood on Halloween would come out at Memory Hill. So,
was there a general? Was Dixie Haygood supposed to be dead?
Yes, she died in the 1700s, somewhere around there, long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So was there a general idea of the cemetery, or was it just the Halloween thing?
It was also a big historical focus with college students. When I was doing my undergrad and I had to get my basic courses the first 2 years. In my history courses, they would talk about Memory Hill and the history there of the famous people that were buried there. Mm-hmm. This was when I was in college. It was before the time of my mind's going blank. The famous writer that Flannery O'Connor.
Yes.
That was before the days of the Flannery O'Connor Museum.
Oh.
Yes. And before the Flannery O'Connor room at Georgia College, I was actually really good friends with one of the librarians here at Georgia College. His name was Neil something. I forget his name. But anyway, he wrote several books about Flannery O'Connor and was instrumental in getting the room for Flannery O'Connor here at Georgia College. So.
And do you have any personal ties to Memory Hill?
I do not. I don't have any family members buried there. My family's buried at different cemeteries here in Milledgeville, but not that one. But I do remember, like, when I was a Girl Scout, Brownie, we would go to the cemetery and do the tours and, be told the stories about the slave quarter with the links.
Yes.
Supposedly the story of the links, if there's 1 link, 2 link, 3 links, if it was 3 links, they were born, lived, and died a slave. So things, such as that. So, yeah.
Do you know much about the community surrounding the cemetery, like specifically during the 1950s?
I do not.
And then, do you think that, like, public opinion of the cemetery was kind of influenced by, like, the 20th century wars? So, like, there was, like, the 2 world wars, or, like, Korea, or Vietnam?
I think that Memory Hill has always been revered as a very special, sacred place. And I know that, I've had students that have come through Student Health Center where I work now, and they're very, very intrigued and interested by the history there. And so I'm glad to see that there's a lot of interest in the cemetery and in history in general. But yeah, I think the cemetery has been a very central part of Milledgeville and the rich history that it has. So.
And do you know much about, like, any potential, like, racial or class issues surrounding it? Like, it's like the slave quarters, or for example, like, someone who didn't grow up, like, wealthy having, like, a particularly not very well kept grave, or...
Yeah, I think there was a lot of that. I think that the cemetery, from what I remember, it was somewhat segregated. There was a white section and there was a non-white section of the cemetery, and the affluent people that were buried there, they tend to have the much nicer markers, whereas a lot of the poorer, not known individuals buried there, sometimes it had no markers at all. And there was just, maybe a fenced off area, and you knew that there were, 10 or 20 people buried there, but you didn't know where they were. So.
I gotcha. So, do people, like, visit the cemetery very often? Because I know when I've gone, it's been pretty empty. Was there a time where people visited it more?
I think it's kind of a generational thing, in that it's like my mother's generation, born in the 1930s, maybe even the 40s or 50s. They were very big on showing respect and visiting graves during special occasions, during every season. My mother's still that way, and so I take her here, there, beyond to pay respects. But I think that the older generations, like my generation, I was born in the 60s, that was kind of a time when I think people have kind of fallen away from those type of traditions. Just, like my husband, he was born in the early 60s, and his dad died, I think, 20 years ago, and he's been to his grave maybe twice since then. So it just seems to be my perception is it seems to be a generational thing, that the older generations were much more in tune to, keeping cemeteries well kept, flowers, all the things. And I know that back when I was younger, we used to have, on Sunday afternoons, on a pretty regular basis, we would have lunch on the grounds from church, and on those days we would go and we would clean up the cemetery and make sure that flowers are there and everything was spruced up. And I don't know that churches do that much anymore. So
yeah, I visited a few times and it just seems like empty. It's kind of sad, but,
it is. Yeah.
Do you think that there's possibly like a gender component as well? Like, do women usually visit more and upkeep it, or is that just like sort of 50-50 split?
Well, I mean, my perception is that women do tend to be more caregiver oriented towards cemeteries and graves and things. Because, like I said, so the difference between even my husband and me, in that I'm very focused on, my dad died a couple of years ago, and I go and there doesn't even really have to be a reason. I'll go and I'll sit and just reflect and think about him and talk to him. And my husband, he says my dad's not there, so I don't even, why bother? So I think it's more of a gender thing. So
let's see, what did I not hit on? Do you think that generally there's been like a shift in the perception of it? Like maybe people put more value on it back in the 1950s, and maybe like now it's just sort of become like another place in Milledgeville?
I think so. I think it's, and I think it partly has to do with the people that are buried there, the people that reverenced them back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of times they're gone. Mm-hmm. So that next generation doesn't have the same reverence for the place as the people who originally had loved ones buried there.
Right.
So now it's just more of a historical place.
Right.
So.
Let's see. Just making sure I had all my questions, because... Oh yeah, are there any stories of like, I'm actually curious about this. Was there ever like any vandalism of the cemetery that you remember? Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the vandalism has occurred, around Halloween. Mm. Not really sure why, but it has. I have heard of other issues of vandalism where people knocked over graves, tombstones, things of the sort. I don't really know why. Mm-hmm. Why anybody would do that, but I have heard of that happening, and that's been happening ever since I was young. I've heard of that. So,
and then aside from Dixie Haygood, do you know of any other like local legends surrounding the cemetery?
I've heard of, and I was told this when I was in Girl Scouts, it was a long time ago. But a Mr. Fish, who's I think his child died possibly, and legend had it that he placed his rocking chair beside the child's grave and rocked himself there until he grieved himself to death. I don't know how true it is, but that was a legend. So
let's see, I hit Korea, all that. So I think that is it for what I have.
Okay.
But thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I really appreciate your insight.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead.
We hope you enjoyed learning more about the people and historical events connected to Milledgeville and Flannery O'Connor in this episode. If you or someone you know has stories to share related to either of these topics, we'd love to hear them. In addition to documenting community memories, you'll also help us preserve your story for future generations. Visit our website, collectingthepastmilledgeville.wordpress.com, to learn more.